Hold on. There it goes. Hey, take it away.
Awesome. Well, thank y'all for all joining us for this 2021 Student Symposium Continuing Education Seminar. This one's titled Water for Texas, Water for the Future. And before we get started, please let me share a few technical instructions with you. If you're having any technical problems, please visit the Zoom support at support.zoom.us or type a question in your chat box. The recording of the seminar without permission from ASCE Texas section is prohibited, and all participants are muted throughout the duration of the seminar. If you have questions, please type them into the chat box in your control panel and we'll address them at the end. So now a quick message from the 2021 Student Symposium Advocate, the Lower Colorado River Authority.
Here at LCRA, we're committed to enhancing the quality of life of the Texans we serve through water stewardship, energy, and community service. We've been serving Texans since 1934, and we continue that legacy today by producing and delivering power, managing the water supply in the lower Colorado River Basin, providing parks, and supporting community development. Our standard for excellence wouldn't be possible without the talented and committed people who work together every day to serve our customers in the great state of Texas. It's meaningful work, and we love what we do. To learn more career opportunities with LCRA, visit www.lcra.org/careers and follow us on social media.
Thanks so much for playing that. We appreciate it. So we're super stoked to help today by being a sponsor and just wanting to, share our services and what we do with all of y'all, which I'm pretty sure already know, being that, we're all reside in the state of Texas. But we're super excited. We're hiring right now. We have lots of positions we're opening, and we already have open. I mean, our job site, every week there's new jobs. So I encourage anybody who's interested to continue to look weekly at the job site and just see anything that does pop up, and remember to check in weekly. But we have the water management side of things. We have the parks that we maintain, operate, ensure that they're, accessible to the community. We have environmental services. They're super involved in everything that we do. And then the transmission side of things, which is the energy distribution to the municipalities and the cooperatives, so that their customers can really have that essential source for them in their daily life. So we service about 75 Texas counties in the state. We have about 5,500 miles of transmission lines in the state of Texas and about 400 substations. We have our various dams that we monitor, operate, take care of, ensure that those are adequately, working and providing that security for us. And then we have various power plants too. I think we have like 5 in the state of Texas. But we're always looking for people to come on board with us. We have great benefits: medical, dental, vision, matching 401k 8%, tuition support, short-term, long-term disability, accident dismemberment. We have family leave, so you don't have to jump on your FMLA after you've been with us for a year. We have some really good incentives, and we really want to bring everyone that wants to be here on board. So don't ever hesitate. You can find me on LinkedIn. My name's Yvonne Saldana. It says Vonnie Saldana, but it's Yvonne, Yvonne. So find me on LinkedIn. And then if you'll have a chance, try to grab one of our managers at the career fair. So thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
And thank you too. Thank you so much for being a sponsor for us as well.
Oh, we're so excited. We're so excited to do this. So yeah, I've been peeping in and stuff. So y'all are very impressive.
Good stuff. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our presenter, Kathleen Jackson, a board member on the Texas Water Development Board since 2014. Kathleen has a pretty diverse background representing agricultural, environmental, industrial, and wholesale supply interests, and includes developing and implementing water management strategies for Southeast Texas. As a professional engineer, Kathleen serves as public affairs manager for one of the world's largest petroleum and petrochemical producers. Additionally, she was involved in production agriculture with her late husband, who ran a cattle operation and farmed rice. She served as past member of the Lower Neches Valley Authority Board of Directors, the Texas Water Conservation Association, and participated on the Sabine Neches Rivers Bay and Estuary Environmental Flows Assessment Program, Stakeholders Committee, and is a longtime resident of Beaumont. Kathleen has 3 children, is a sixth generation Texans who all reside and work in Texas, and 3 grandchildren. So Kathleen, we're so excited to have you here today. Welcome.
Well, Natalie, thank you so much. And it is an honor and a privilege and a pleasure to be here. I'm somewhat envious of the students because you are embarking on your career. And, you know, I kind of step back and think of the time, you know, years and years ago where I kind of sat where you are now. I'm a chemical engineer by background, but I served as a student chapter president for at North Carolina State. So really see the value in what student chapters do, and really appreciate ASCE for ongoing support of its student chapters, as well as, and we're going to talk about this today, some of the great insight and thoughts and ideas that ASCE has provided to the board and kind of helped us as board members as we move forward and look at water policy and also build out that infrastructure that we know is so important for future generations. So to kind of kick things off, if we could go to the first slide. And maybe, again, this is the student symposium, but I wanted to give you just a real brief, in the next slide, kind of like a real brief overview of what the Texas Water Development Board is. And, you know, from an engineering standpoint, because I serve as the engineer on the board, for me, I like to talk about is the data repository for all water data for Texas. And so important as policymakers and decision makers that we have good science and good data and good tools to make those decisions with. And the better the data, the better the science, the better the science, the better the policy. So we are the data repository for all water data for Texas, and it's all publicly available. And as you know from your background, that it's so important that you have this impartial third party, and that not just the results of studies be available, but also that raw data so that it can be utilized for folks that want to draw their own conclusions, and also for developing new and innovative technologies. Secondly, we are a bank. We have money to loan right here at home in Texas, and you won't get a better interest rate anywhere than the Texas Water Development Board. And lastly, we can provide some technical service. We can't engineer the project for you, but our folks have seen a lot, and so they can offer up, you know, options, their thoughts and ideas on either challenges or opportunities that communities might have, or put you in touch with some of the folks that have. And we have some tremendously successful projects that are moving forward in Texas. And again, why do we do all this? It's for our children and our children's children. And, you know, these are our children, and, you know, they're all living and working in Texas, and, you know, so proud of them, and really so proud of each and every one of you and what, you know, you are embarking on, and the role that as engineers you'll be assuming in the local communities where you're going to live and work and raise your families. So next. So Texas is in perpetual drought, punctuated by times of flood. And one thing we know in Texas is that things happen very quickly. And so, you know, this is a snapshot of what Texas looked like in May of 2010. And you can see how quickly things changed across the state. So we went to, you know, a state where there was very little drought, you know, into October of 2011. And just between May and 2011, things changed extremely and very quickly. So important for the future of our state that we be prepared in times of drought. Next slide. The other thing we know is that people are moving to Texas every day. And so depending on who you're talking to, it's anywhere from 1,000 to 1,200 people, and nobody is bringing any water with them. So next slide. So how do we prepare for drought, prepare for this growing population that's coming to Texas, and also promote resiliency, making sure that we have the water infrastructure, that we have the wastewater treatment that we need, that we are prepared and building out the infrastructure that we need to mitigate flood. And, I like to tell folks that, on the water supply side, particularly, it's not one big answer. It's a lot of little answers. And, for me, at the very top of the list is conservation. I came from an industry background. I spent 37 years with ExxonMobil. And back in the day when I was in operations and I was in engineering and doing capital budget planning, if I'd gone to the corporation and said, we want to build a new unit or we want to expand the capacity of the refinery, the very first question they would ask is, tell me how efficiently you're using the resources you already have. And that's really what conservation is. It's efficiently using the resources that we already have. And in my mind, there are kind of two parts of conservation. One is that part of it that is just your own personal actions that need to become second nature in terms of how you personally view water resources, and simple things like, turning off the faucet when you're brushing your teeth, and just being conscious of the fact that this is a resource that is precious, and it's one that, as we know across the state, is dwindling. And the second part of it, and I think this is what we've done such a great job in Texas most recently, really since, particularly 2014, is investing in infrastructure, if you will, to keep more of those water molecules inside the pipeline. So going in, and particularly for aging infrastructure, replacing the potable water lines, going in and doing metering, because we know as engineers, if it's an important enough parameter, if it's important enough and something that we should be concerned about, then it's important enough to measure it. And, we need to measure it to kind of see where we are and to identify what those opportunities are, and then to measure our success. Reuse, we're seeing this all over Texas, communities taking advantage of reutilizing water. We know that theoretically, there is not one more molecule of water in the world today than when God created the earth. So it's incumbent on all of us to be good stewards of it so we can treat it and it can go back and be used again and again. My late husband was a rice farmer, and he said, Kathleen, there's an ocean of water under Texas, which there is. It's just not all fresh. It's brackish or slightly saline. And so we're seeing communities where there is, an abundance of brackish water, looking at that to treat it. And sometimes they're blending it with fresh water. So brackish desal facilities up in the North Texas area, as well as in South Texas. So certainly a technology that engineers are engaged and involved in, and something that is becoming more and more of a strategy that is expanding across our state. Whatever group I talk to, it can be a group of 10 people or it can be a group of 500 people. There is always this kind of hand that goes up at the end of the presentation, and they're all interested in, tell us what the status is on seawater desal in Texas. And of course, we're very fortunate right now that the city of Corpus Christi, in partnership with industry and the port, is utilizing the resources of the board and moving forward with a seawater desal facility in Corpus Christi. Again, an abundant and unending supply of water that can be accessed along our 370 miles of coast that we have here in Texas. Aquifer storage and recovery, we know that we have reservoirs across the state, but as soon as that rainfall occurs and the reservoir is collected, it immediately starts to evaporate. So a tremendous opportunity to be able to take that water, store it underground, and then be able to harvest it later when it's needed. And of course, continuing to look at the groundwater across the state, the science and the data, and how do we capture that? How do we utilize that? And then also continuing to see the use of reservoirs. Again, all part of the overall equation. Of course, as engineers, you look at this list and you automatically think of a system, right? So it's, how do you utilize each one of these strategies and incorporate it overall as part of the system? Next slide. So a big part of what the board does, and we are unique in Texas, really, and anywhere in the nation, is that we do water planning. And we believe that local communities know best. Another way of saying that is that nobody tells Texans what to do. We have 16 regional water planning groups across the state. They are made up of over 450 volunteers that represent small communities, big cities, industry, agriculture, and they all come together and say, what do we have today? What do we need for the future? And what are those strategies or projects that we need to implement and put in the water plan, these regional water plans, in order to make sure that we have the water that we'll need for the next 50 years. It's a 50-year outlook. We do it every 5 years. And engineers are actively engaged in this process by executing and going forth. And as we do the water planning process, it's a very well vetted and prescribed science and data-driven approach. As you know, as engineers, you execute to a process, and that's very much what water planning does. So we take the 16 regional water plans, we put all together, and that becomes the state water plan. So we have completed 5 cycles of this bottom-up process for planning, and our most recent state water plan is in draft format. It's out there for public comment, which is the kind of the last step of the process. So very, very important in Texas that it be a bottom-up process. Again, we think local communities know best, and that we have a plan going forward that in turn we can execute. So I tell folks we don't plan to plan, we plan to build. And I think next we're going to talk about the part that probably most of y'all will be most excited about. And that is, well, how do we take this planning, which is very robust, it's very, again, community and, bottom-up focused, and actually translate that into, the projects that Texas needs moving forward, the infrastructure that we need to make sure that, again, our children and our children's children have the water that they need. So next slide. So what I thought we'd do is that we would take a little tour across Texas, and we'd take a little peek into each one of the 16 regional water planning areas and share with you what some of those projects are, the significance of them, maybe something a little bit unique about them, because I think as you kind of look at what your future is, where you think you might be interested, how you want to kind of contribute, knowing and understanding, I think, what the Water Development Board is doing, what communities across the state and engineers across the state are doing to make sure that we're building out that infrastructure. It'll really give you a good insight into kind of what's out there and what the future is and how engineers are contributing every day. So let's start with Region A and look at the city of Amarillo with their Potter County well field. They were using surface water and very much were in need of another water supply. And so, came to the board, utilized our low interest financing to create the Potter County well field. The small community, the city of Booker, this is a picture, with some of their community members. When I went up there and visited with them, they were looking at doing some infrastructure improvements for their small community. And they were so close to the Oklahoma border that literally from where we were standing here, you could look out into the distance and you could see Oklahoma. So I think, part of what the emphasis here and the takeaway is that it's not just about the big cities, it's also about the small communities, because from a management of risk standpoint, you're only as good as your poorest performer. So if one small community is out of water, then Texas is out of water. So important, again, that we all come together and that we plan and we build for the future. So let's take a look at the next slide, which is Region B. In Region B, the project there that I wanted to kind of brief you on was the one that the city of Wichita Falls did. During the drought of 2011, their water resource that was available to them was extremely low. Lake Arrowhead was down to like 19%. And they were very fortunate in that they had a reverse osmosis facility that was available to be able to, and they were using it to treat the salty water from the Red River. So they retooled that and actually took their wastewater, put it through this new reverse osmosis facility and treated it and put it back into the front end of their water supply. So a direct potable reuse project. And then on down the road, continued to use the resources of the board and actually took that water, put it back into Lake Arrowhead. And their long-term objective was to do an indirect potable reuse project. So a great example of reuse. And actually the city of Wichita Falls received an award from the Environmental Protection Agency for actually, implementing this large scale direct and then eventually their long-term solution for indirect potable resource. So a great example of community leadership and engagement by the engineering community to make this strategy, which, really up until then hadn't been anything that had been implemented in a large scale, a reality. And actually it got them through the 2011 drought. Next slide is Region C. And Region C, of course, is in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And they have two projects here that I wanted to kind of share with you. One of them is the integrated pipeline. And so this is a project that's actually taking water. It's serving almost 1.5 million Texans. It's a 150-mile pipeline to move water from, where it was to where it's needed. And what was to me kind of so interesting about this particular project, and there's a picture of it here, is that they have what they tell me is the largest gate valve in the world. And it is 14.9 feet wide. It weighs 110 tons. It's 45 feet tall. And just the part that's above the ground is 2 stories tall. So again, you can get the idea of the scale and the massive project that was put in, again, to transfer water resources from where it was to where it was needed. Kind of to the left is the picture of the North Texas Municipal Water District, Lake Bodark, the first major reservoir to be built in Texas in 30 years. So, not only serving, the large communities, but also nearly 100 small communities. So sometimes you think these big projects are just for the big cities, but it also serves and helps the small communities that are engaged in the project. And, just yesterday, they had kind of a real kind of benchmark day for this project, and that they started filling the reservoir. So again, another strategy moving forward. And they came and worked with the board and got utilized the State Water Implementation Fund of Texas in order to move this project forward. That investment in incentive capital, again, to help these large regional projects move forward and prepare not only for the needs of today, but also for the needs of the future. So then let's go to Region D in the next slide. So Region D, example here is Riverbend Water Resources, where they actually went in, and again, another collaborative effort, a number of small communities coming together, and acquired the Texas Americas Center to put together, again, a regional project utilizing the resources of the board to provide both water and wastewater facilities. In the next slide, we have Region E, and this is the mayor of the city of Marfa. And they are putting in a small, they're putting in a water well. So a very small community, again, showing that it's, it's not just about the big cities, it's also about the small communities, and utilizing the resources of the board and the State Water Implementation Fund of Texas in order to put in a water well. In the next slide, okay, we're at Region F, and this is the city administrative folks with the city of Colorado City. Again, they were working on a wastewater treatment plant improvement. And again, so important that not only do we provide for additional water supply for communities, but at the same time we evaluate and communities evaluate and take the necessary steps to either upgrade, expand, or sometimes replace their wastewater treatment facilities, so that again, we're making sure that the water that goes back to rivers and streams to be used again is and is protective of human health. So the city of Colorado City here, and kind of getting a feel for what it's like to be out and work with a small community. The next slide is Region G, and that's the city of Abilene. We talked earlier about how important it is to have water meters and be able to actually go out and measure how much water that you're actually using. And so many communities are looking at that from a water conservation standpoint, getting a good feel for how much water they're actually using, putting those meters in. And it's not just that the utility oftentimes has that record, and it saves them the cost of people having to go out there and actually physically read the meters by hand. But oftentimes they're able to give that information and put it either up on their website or sometimes text it to folks. And so they're able to actively kind of manage and see what their water usage is during, during the billing cycle. So for example, if you had a leak and you have a water meter and that information is available, in some communities, there's a little alarm that goes off, you get a message, and you can go out and check and see if there's something, again, on your side of the pipe, and you can go ahead and correct it very quickly and save that water, that precious resource, before it's lost. So again, the city of Abilene using our Clean Water State Revolving Fund program in order to move forward and do a big meter replacement project. And we're seeing lots and lots of those in communities taking advantage of that. Next slide is in Region H. And so now we're kind of in the Houston area, and talk a little bit about the Loose Bayou project, which is going to take water from the Trinity and move it over to Lake Houston and build a massive water treatment plant. It's a regional project. It's going to provide for the needs of the Houston area for years to come. It's pushing a $5 billion project, again, benefiting, the neighboring regional water authorities, as well as, what probably represents about 25% of the population today in Texas, and something that continues to grow. Looking kind of across the nation and where this project kind of falls in that, today the Loose Bayou project is the largest water infrastructure project ongoing in the nation. So is planning paying off? Are people, taking the state water plan? Are they implementing it? Are they preparing for the future? And I say that, in my mind, there's a resounding yes, because again, all of these strategies that are in the state water plan, their engineers are working with their local communities, and local communities are kind of taking the leadership to move these projects forward. So just like water planning is a bottom-up process, implementation in Texas is a bottom-up process. And that's kind of where engineers come in, because you're seen as, as trusted messengers. And so oftentimes engineers, whether you're working on the project or you're in the community, you'll be asked. And so your response to how important it is to take advantage of the low interest rates today, build it with today's dollars, because the cost of things continues to escalate. And then, to get that resiliency in place, so it's not, in the middle of the night that you get the call and it's an emergency, and then you have to do it, and whatever the cost is, you just kind of have to bear that. So being proactive rather than reactive. And of course, the reverse osmosis facility that Brazos Port Water Authority put in, again, utilizing the SWIFT funds, and another strategy there to get a water supply for that community. Next slide. Region I, which is the city of Kirbyville, kind of close to my hometown, which is Beaumont in Southeast Texas. And this particular project, when I first visited the community, the mayor kind of took me around and kind of showed me, part of their concern, which is they were having inflow and infiltration through their, for their delivery system to their wastewater treatment plant. So of course, what that means is that they're having to treat more than what they otherwise would if they didn't have that infiltration. So for them particularly, there was an energy efficiency that was gained by going in there and replacing that aging delivery infrastructure. And then they were so successful with their wastewater treatment project that they came back and worked with us on improvements to their water system. So these are the plant operators, and that's one of the things that I always find, you know, so interesting going out in the field and touching base with folks, is being able to talk not only to the engineers, but also to the operators. And so many times those really successful projects engage the operators. The engineers will tell you that we engage the operators in the actual, got their input in the design and kind of moving forward through the construction phase of the project. So these are two of the operators that were in Kirbyville at their wastewater treatment plant when I visited. And of course, that's Region I, the Regional Water Planning Group, that again, community leaders coming together, putting these projects in the plan, and then community leadership actually implementing and moving the project forward. So next slide. In Region J, this is the city of Del Rio. They put in a water line replacement project and then also did wastewater treatment plant improvements. So, you know, every community looking at their challenges and addressing them in a way that is that it's specific to their own area. So I think that's one of the real advantages of the way that we do water planning and the way that we move projects forward in Texas, is that it's again, it's a bottom-up process. It's specific to the community, and it's really geared to meet those needs. Again, with everybody kind of thinking along the same line, that, you know, we want to get in there. We want to do a fresh look-see every 5 years. We want to use the best available data and science, and they look to the board for that. And then we want to make sure wherever you are in Texas, whether you are in Houston or Dallas or in the city of Del Rio, that you have water available for communities for the next 50 years. So next slide is Region K. So meet Lynette Franca. She's the general manager of the New Ulm Water Supply Corporation. And when I went to visit her, I was kind of driving down the road and I kept looking for the office. And finally it's like, okay, I'm just gonna have to throw in the towel and call her. So I pulled into this driveway at a house, and I called her and she said, Kathleen, what are you doing? You're sitting in my driveway. And she said, come on inside. And her office was in her home. And this is a picture of her office. And she pointed to there was a wall phone, you know, with the cord on it, one of the old wall phones. And she said, I used that phone and I talked to the Water Development Board in Austin, and we put together our application. And we're able to kind of move forward, put in their meter replacement project, and also get a new ground storage tank for their water supply corporation. So Lynette also came and spoke at our Water for Texas conference at a panel and kind of shared, you know, her thoughts and ideas and her experiences with other, you know, small communities. And you know, to me here, if Lynette Franca can do it and put together the application and utilize her wall phone, then I think anybody can utilize the resources of the board and move forward and make sure that they have the water supplies that they need for the future. Next slide. This is Region L, and the San Antonio water system. They have worked with the board, and collectively, in all the years that they've worked with us and all the projects that they've done, utilized about $1 billion in resources for the board. And you know, just in my mind, just a great engineering example of an entity that is really approaching water supply as a system. As many of you may know, the Riverwalk is reused water. So they basically kind of, you know, said, okay, what do we need to do first? And so they have a very rigorous and comprehensive water conservation program. They obviously have implemented reuse. They've built a desal plant, and you know, there's a desalination plant in El Paso, the K. Bailey Hutchinson plant, and then there's of course the one that SAWS operates. And you know, K. Bailey Hutchinson will say, well, we're the largest in Texas, and SAWS will say, well, we're the largest in Texas at full build out. But you know, the great news is that we've got 2 of the largest desal plants maybe in the country right here in Texas. And SAWS, of course, with their Water Oaks facility, not only put in the desal facility to be able to treat slightly brackish water, but also underground aquifer and storage facilities. So again, that they can, store water when the water is available and then have it during times of need later. So really just looking at all kinds of different strategies and utilizing, again, not just one big answer, but lots of little answers in terms of and how they approach their future water supply. And of course, they're huge participants in Region L. So put those projects in the state water plan, and then because they're in the state water plan, it avails you to financing, because Texas ties science and data to planning and then planning to financing. So if you're in the state water plan, you avail yourself to the incentive capital or the very low interest rates that are available through the state. So next slide. Region M, Hidalgo County Irrigation District number 1. Of course, we know that in Texas, water is tremendously needed and has been utilized for the agricultural community. So important that we have agricultural water conservation programs on farms so that the individual user is able to utilize the resources of the board. We have a agricultural water conservation grant program that provides a cost share for soil moisture analyzers, which our farmers will tell us is very important to kind of have that data to be able to know exactly how much they need to water and when, and therefore conserve water, as well as a very efficient irrigation equipment. So not only important to have it on farm, but also to do improvements system-wide. And the examples here are the Hidalgo County Irrigation District number 1, who used the resources of the SWIFT program in order to line their irrigation canals. And then of course, United Irrigation District utilized the resources of the board for an off-channel storage facility. So next slide. Region N is the city of Corpus Christi and the desal plant that we talked about earlier. And of course, an abundant supply, an unending supply of water along the Texas coast. And, just really tremendous opportunity there, particularly for an area of the state that is has clean burning natural gas, has attracted manufacturing. And in the manufacturing world, I mean, nothing is more important than reliability, and having a reliable water supply is something that is basically, part of their business plan. And so being able to kind of work with the city and with the port and putting together a seawater desal plant really promotes reliability within the manufacturing and also gives those benefits to the community. So again, just an example of Region N coming together, putting together their regional plan, and then feeding that up in the state water plan, and then utilizing the resources of the state to move forward. And right now doing the planning stage for a seawater desal plant for the city of Corpus Christi. Next slide. In Region O, this is the city of Lubbock, and they actually utilize the Clean Water State Revolving Fund to put in a flood control project. And so, of course, the role of the board has changed recently to putting together the first ever state flood plan. And also we have funding from the legislature for the Flood Infrastructure Fund. But we also have resources that are available through the board through our Clean Water State Revolving Fund, through our state revolving fund. And again, utilizing those resources to do a project. And this is the Lubbock engineering team. And then Lee Huntoon is the project manager for the board, and she's the one that kind of has the hard hat on with her hand off to the side. So great that our folks are able to get out in the field. And one plug I would say for engineers, maybe considering, what is your first assignment? What would you like to go do? Or maybe what would you like to do later on in your career? It's just a great opportunity working with the board to be able to get out there and get kind of some hands-on, get engaged in projects kind of early on, and particularly to work with other professional engineers, particularly if you're working on your EIT. Next slide is Region P. And I know we heard from LCRA at the beginning. They were one of our sponsors. They also are work with the board, and they have a very impactful project. The off-channel reservoir, the Arbuckle Reservoir, If you're a downstream user, say a farmer, and you need water, you have to make a call for that water, and it takes 5 to 7 days to get there. Well, by the time it arrives, if it either has rained or you don't need the water anymore, it just kind of goes on to the Gulf. So what LCRA and some of the others are doing are building these off-channel reservoirs to be able to collect that water, making the overall system much more efficient. And one of the things here that I thought was so impactful about this project is that this is real water. This increases their farm yield from 600,000 acre feet to 690,000 acre feet. So, you know, a great project. Again, LCRA came and worked with the board. They utilized defund, saved some money, were able to move forward very quickly, I think, in the financing project. And I've actually gone out and toured this facility, and again, just a great example of, again, one of the other type of strategies that can be used to make sure that we have the water supply that we need for the future. And a great project is an outgrowth of the work that they're doing in Region P. In the next slide. This just kind of wraps everything up. So we took a tour of all of the 16 regional water planning groups. And this kind of shows you across the state what the commitment has been since inception. So, you know, the board came into existence in 1957. A group of leaders from across the state basically said, we'll never, ever let this happen again. We'll never let Texas run out of water after the drought of the 50s. And so to date, over $30 billion in commitments for projects moving forward that impact communities across Texas. And about 1.3 billion of that has gone to rural communities. So grants and loans across the state, again, helping to build out that very important water infrastructure. So next slide. So anytime there is somewhat of a presentation that I give, particularly to students, I always have kind of an ask. And so I guess my ask and my challenge to you is to be champions for regional collaboration. I think if we've seen anything after the drought of 2011, if we've seen anything after Hurricane Harvey, if we've seen anything, the outcome of the freeze is that, and this was a statement that was made during the Eye of the Storm report, which was created after Hurricane Harvey, and it was a quote by Governor Abbott that said, we need to future-proof our state. We don't know really what's going to come, what's going to be next, but we need to be prepared, and we need to be able to weather whatever that happens to be. And so what we've talked about today and what the resources of the board are intended to do through science, through planning, and through financing is to be able to future-proof Texas. And then, of course, particularly with flood, and this is a picture taken in Houston, and I'm very familiar with it because this is the cutoff that kind of heads you towards Beaumont, Texas. But a devastating event that we certainly, we know the event could happen again. We can't predict Mother Nature, but we certainly can be better prepared, and we can build out our infrastructure to be more resilient. So particularly with flood, we know that what happens upstream impacts those downstream and vice versa. So important that we all come together and that we work together collaboratively. Of course, ASCE was huge after Hurricane Harvey, and I think that's been mentioned in some of the other presentations. And the initiative that ASCE took to put together a report to become engaged in technical decisions and discussions, and to offer up their expertise as we move forward and kind of, as a state, come together and say, what are those resources that we need? What is that funding that we need? And how can we make sure that we move forward and we utilize those and we implement, again, to future-proof Texas. Next slide. Just wanted to very briefly kind of share with you what's been going on in the world of flood. We were charged during the last legislative session to put together the first ever state flood plan. It's going to be modeled after our very successful regional water planning process that we just talked about. There are 15 regional flood planning groups within the state. I was looking at the presentations earlier, and I saw some of the folks that were participating, and I did see Liv Hasselback, who serves as one of the flood planning members in Southeast Texas, was attending your seminar, as I'm sure there are others who are participating. And again, it's the same concept, people who represents stakeholder groups, interest groups, coming together, volunteers, working together collaboratively and putting together a statewide flood plan, again, with the idea that eventually we would tie, it would be based on good science and data, and then we would tie that planning to financing. We were very fortunate in that the legislature devoted some funding to kind of jumpstart this process. And so we're in the process of getting out the Flood Infrastructure Fund projects, both projects that will match some of the local funds that are needed for federal projects, early warning system, and of course, what we heard from engineers across the state, the need to do regional flood planning and getting people kind of engaged and kickstarted in that process. And then also actually moving forward with some flood infrastructure, flood mitigation projects. So exciting work that's going on in the world of flood, and of course, the Water Development Board. Our engineers and engineers across Texas are engaged in working and doing that. Next slide. Something that's kind of very dear to my heart and that ASCE has been a tremendous partner on is asset management. I tell folks that, particularly in your community, people look at engineers as trusted advisors. I mean, you're out there with the T-ball team in the stands watching the kids play. They know you, they participate with you in church or in school. And so when a question comes up, oftentimes it's the engineer that's kind of looked at to give their viewpoint. And so important that engineers kind of help and engage in particularly infrastructure and advise communities, again, that it's so much better to be proactive rather than reactive. So go in and this is an example, the city of Llano that went in and actually utilized the resources of the board to do an asset management plan. Again, kind of not only looking at, okay, what is in place right now? What does your system look like? So many particularly small communities we find don't even have an idea of, where the equipment is, where the lines are. That very first step is let's get the map in place so that we know exactly what our assets are. And then to look at, the life of those assets, look at the risk associated with them, and actually come up with a replacement plan, work with the board, take advantage of low interest rates, build it with today's dollars so that hopefully you don't get the call in the middle of the night, the city does, and saying something has failed and you have no choice. You've got to move forward at whatever the expense and whatever the cost is to replace that. So again, promoting reliability, and also, a big part of this is operating protocol and operating procedures, because we know that operational integrity is not just the facilities, it's also, how we maintain it and how we operate it. So very excited about this program, and certainly ASCE has been very supportive of it, gotten the word out for folks. And I think it's one of the things that's making a huge difference, particularly in small communities across Texas. Next slide. Well, LCRA gave their pitch, I guess, at the top of the presentation, and we're giving ours too. We're hiring. We're very much recruiting engineers, and I've been, it's been a dream come true opportunity for me. I worked in the private sector for 37 years, and the opportunity to come and work at the Texas Water Development Board and see the impact that we can have on communities across Texas for something that's so important as making sure that they have a reliable supply of water, as well as wastewater treatment, and then now particularly with floods. So we're hiring. We'd love for you to come and consider us, be a part of our team. I think we've got a great opportunity, particularly for someone who wants to get out in the field early, actually be actively and engaged in. And what you've seen are some very impactful projects. Have the opportunity to work with a professional engineer if you're and hopefully your objective is to go on and get your professional engineer. I'm a testament to that. I mean, when you start out, you don't necessarily know where your career is going to lead, but I feel like that a big part of the reason that I'm able to do what I'm doing today is because years and years ago, I you know, took the time, took the effort, moved forward and got my registered professional engineer's license. So I would encourage all of y'all to do that. And again, continue to be actively engaged in ASCE. They're doing such great work. They work extremely hard, and everything that we have kind of reached out and asked in terms of their thoughts and ideas and engagement, they've been right there for us. So next slide. We do offer internship opportunities, and ours are, you know, we can do it during the summer, the fall, or the spring. Applications are accepted year-round. It's a 3-month commitment and a minimum of 10 hours a week. So if that's something that you're interested in, we put the website up here that you can go out and you can visit. Next slide. Again, just wanted to thank ASCE for their continued partnership. These are some pictures of some of the previous, I guess, interactions that we've had with the student chapter, and the great work I think that ASCE is doing to reach out to their youngest and newest potential members. And please know that anything that we as the board can do to continue to help you encourage the students in their active role moving forward, and not just in the engineering profession, but also as their role in terms of leadership in the community, helping people to understand the importance of investment in infrastructure, you know, getting out there and building something that we know is going to be sustainable and reliable and resilient for the future. So it's been a great partnership with ASCE, and one that we hope will continue for many years to come. And in the last slide is greetings from the other 2 members of our board. And so Brooke Pop serves in the business and legal slot, lots of energy, and she came from Glenn Hager's office. So it's just a pleasure to work with her. Peter Lake is our chairman. He's from Tyler. His background is financial. And of course, I serve in the engineering slot. So wonderful to be here today. I congratulate everyone on your opportunities that are before you. And please know that anything and everything that the Water Development Board can do in helping you in working with communities to achieve your goal, we stand ready to do so. So thanks for having me, and it's been wonderful being here.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. I definitely think you've been to all nooks and crannies of Texas based on your pictures and just the description of all of the different regions. If anyone has any questions that come in, I haven't seen any as of yet, but do feel free to write them in the chat. Kathleen, one question I had was that I know one of the initiatives is to really emphasize conservation of water. Is there any talks going on about raising the cost of water to deter waste?
So actually there are, you know, communities across Texas, and they do rate studies, right? Mm-hmm. And so many of them have come back with water rates that actually encourage water conservation. And so we know that there are fixed costs associated with running a water treatment plant. And that as part of those fixed costs, particularly if you've got debt service, that has to be part of your fixed cost or your fixed rate. But the incremental cost beyond that, many communities have actually put in a rate structure that you know, you can use a fixed amount, okay, but then above that, if you go, it actually costs you a little bit more per gallon than what the fixed cost would be. So actually putting a rate structure in place that encourages conservation. Mm-hmm. Another thing that some communities have done is they have like teams that, you know, go out and, you know, look at people who are watering their yards, and if they have watering during certain parts of the day, they have watering restrictions, and they've put in place, you know, how many times a week that you can water. And So they kind of go out and they audit that. And if they find something that's kind of amiss, then you get a little call, and then, you know, first time is fine. And then after that, you know, in some communities, it's like, you know, they take a little bit different action. So I think there are a number of communities out there that are taking very proactive steps in things that they're doing kind of as part of their ongoing business. Another thing that they're doing is they're investing in conservation and keeping more water molecules inside the pipeline by actually going out and upgrading their leaking pipes, right? So they're investing and putting in, you know, in their potable water system, they're going in and replacing that piping and putting in water systems that are more efficient. So not just water conservation, but energy conservation.
Well, I think you got a couple more thank yous in the chat, not only from me and ASCE, but others as well. So we really appreciate you coming. And everyone, I believe there's one other event coming up at 3 o'clock, the R. John Craig Legacy event. And then will be a break and happy hour after that. So we'll send y'all off.
Okay, thank you, Natalie.
Kathleen, this is Sean Merrill, Texas Section President. I want to thank you as always. You were very insightful in your presentations, and we're really glad to have you anytime you want to come and talk with ASCE. So thank you again.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for being on. That's so great of you to be here. Y'all are doing a wonderful job. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone. We'll now stop the recording.